Welcome back to Just Talking. We have got a great show for you today because we have a great guest for us this evening, and that is Jon Siskel, who's a filmmaker at Siskel Jacobs Productions. Jon, nice to see you today.
Good to see you, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Let's start off. You're into filmmaking. How did you get started or inspired in filmmaking?
That's a great question. Well, my uncle is Gene Siskel, and so movies were definitely a part of my life growing up and an appreciation for film as a medium for storytelling. But I actually went to Beloit College in Wisconsin and studied English literature and started, writing for newspapers and magazines out of college. And so I was more interested in kind of the written word, but an opportunity came up to move out to LA and start writing for TV. And that really set me on the path. I came back to Chicago to work with Bill Curtis at Curtis Productions, making documentaries for A&E, History Channel, Discovery Channel, places like that. And then my partner Greg and I started at Siskel Jacobs Productions.
Well, I'll tell you, I do have to make a note with Gene Siskel. I grew up on the Siskel and Ebert reviews, and they definitely paved the way to all these documentaries and even the independent films and
Yeah.
the staple in Americana as well. Um, and also, growing up, did he talk about movies, or was it when he was in family affairs? Did he
Oh no.
all the time
Talked about it.
stuff?
Talked about it all the time, and really was interested in engaging you in a conversation about film, not just like, yeah, I liked it. No, it was a real conversation. And he was, for a lot of my younger years, he was a bachelor, and so he would bring us along to movies. Like, we would do two in a day many times.
Your partner, Greg Jacobs. So how did you guys meet, and when did you decide to form a production company?
So Greg worked at a company called Towers Productions that was doing similar kind of work to Curtis Productions. So we knew each other that way, but also our wives at the time were good friends. And so we knew each other. And I left Curtis first and started freelancing and doing my own stuff. I actually created a show with my brother that used to air on Core TV. We did 2 seasons of a show we created called Fake Out, where we would teach people how to, we had an FBI face reader who could teach people how to detect if you were lying and how to lie and subvert detection. And so we created a game show out of that. But then Greg was ready to leave Towers, and so we started the company about 20 years ago.
What was your first film that you directed?
So the first film as directors was with Greg, and that was a documentary we did for, well, it was an independent film that we sold to Discovery Channel, and it was called Head On, and it's a great film. It's about people out in Joliet, west of Chicago, doing this thing called Team Demolition Derby. So we followed, over the course of the summer, 2 teams vying for the World Championship. And basically, Team Demolition Derby is like roller derby with cars. So they race 4 cars against 4 cars around a dirt track. So 2 teams, 4 cars against 4 cars, and then have to collect collectively 5 laps. But as soon as the checker flag drops, they will literally cut the infield and start, smashing into each other. And they'll do literally head-on collisions at like 30 miles an hour. It's crazy.
And that's a question I guess to bring up. How do these topics come to you when you do a documentary? Do you seek it out? Do they come to you? How does that work?
It really is a combination of all of those things. It's things that we find hearing a story on the radio, or reading something in the newspaper, or a friend tells us about something, or an organization sometimes will approach us. Louder Than a Bomb was a film that started because my partner Greg was walking down the street in Chicago and saw on the marquee of the Metro, which is a rock venue, Louder Than a Bomb Youth Poetry Festival. And lined up like for blocks were teenagers waiting to get into this. And he was like, what is that? And why are all these kids lined up for poetry? And that sent us kind of on the path. And we reached out to the organization who runs it and said, we're interested in telling this story. And we did.
That's terrific. I just recently watched it. And again, had you not made that documentary, I don't know if I would have even known about that. So it's just amazing what the power of film and documentary can do as well. When you're doing Louder Than a Bomb, do you also yourself learn a lot about it as you're documenting it?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's for us, one of the wonderful things about what we do is because every film is a journey into a subject matter that, we're not experts on, and we're certainly not experts after, but we really do immerse ourselves in it, researching as we begin production, and then kind of, living it with the subjects. So yeah, it's definitely immersive.
And about how long would that process, would you say, take from the actually you came up?
Every film is different. Louder Than a Bomb was probably, in total research and development and pre-production, production, and then editing, a little over 3 years.
But the work pays off because, like I said, not only do you learn about the poetry, but you learn about these people, the students, and then
Certainly.
all of how you captured the Chicago area as well. It all rolled up into one, and I encourage anyone to go check out that. And we were talking about topics. I believe you produced or executive produced that 102 Minutes That Changed America, the 9/11.
So for that film, we really were kind of, my partner Greg had the idea for that approach, and we really were the company through which the program ran. And so Greg and I were overseeing the production at a high level, working with producers that we knew in New York. The film is very unique. It airs every September 11th on the History Channel. It's become one of a number of films that kind of are perennial 9/11 films, and it's unique in that the approach there's no talking heads, no narration. You're just immersed in the day through the footage of people who either picked up a camera and filmed out their windows what they were seeing, to raw news footage. Also, the 911 transmissions between the emergency responders, 911 calls, and all of that is kind of woven together to tell the story of, as the title refers to, the 102 minutes from when the first plane hit to when the second tower came down. And it's told in real time, kind of with a ticking clock. So it's a very visceral and intense experience. It really puts you back in the moment of that morning.
And I think that key word for you talked about is approach, because when you do documentaries, not all documentaries are the same, especially in your work too as well. So what type of different approaches are there when you look at something at a project?
There's so many. We tend to, again, that is a very unique film, and we took that approach and applied it to a number of other events for a series that we created for the National Geographic Channel called Witness. And there are only, a few select events that can kind of allow for that approach because you need so many cameras trained on this one moment. So we did Hurricane Katrina, we did the tsunami in Japan for Witness, and we have a film that's just about to be released called The Here Now Project. And that film basically takes the whole planet, the year 2021, and tells the story of climate change from the perspective of people living through these climate events. The 2021 was the deep freeze in Texas, Hurricane Ida, but also flooding in Germany, wildfires in Russia and Siberia, the Heat Dome in Canada. So that is its own unique approach. But mostly what we do, like Louder Than a Bomb, is tell these stories in a kind of what's called verite way, where you're a kind of a fly on the wall, where we're not intrusive in the event. The camera is kind of back, watching and listening and observing as life unfolds within the parameters of, like Louder Than a Bomb, a calendar year of these high school students competing in a poetry slam.
Okay, well, let's talk about one of the major reasons I have you on the show here today is talk about this excellent documentary that you put together, which was called Memorial. It will be playing in Highland Park at the Wayfire Theaters. If for those who don't know, there was a tragic event in Highland Park where there was a mass shooting. And well, I'll have John explain what was the approach and what's this documentary about.
Yeah, and so Memorial is very unique in the approach. I grew up in Highland Park. I raised my kids there. I live in Chicago now, but when this happened, being a filmmaker, being from the community, I questioned, is there a story for me to tell there? And it was all just so terrible and horrific that I just felt like this is not something I want to wade into. But about a month after it happened, a good friend of mine said, you really should come and see. I've created this memorial in Highland Park, and people are coming and sharing their stories, and it's this very healing space. I think it might be interesting for you. So I went, didn't bring a camera, just there as an observer, and it was so powerful and so moving that I felt like, yeah, this would be my way into telling the story.
Every subject matter is tough, but this had to really be tough since you grew up there, up there as well. How was it getting through it? Because I don't know if I could.
Yeah, it was personal, and it was, I guess, because of my proximity to it. Yeah, it was emotional in ways. Every film it tends to be very emotional because you're focusing on people's lives and going into this thing that means so much to them. But this was different. This was definitely different. And the approach I took was different in that I just instinctively knew early on that I didn't want to film the subjects. I wanted you just to hear their voices. So when I was at the memorial, listening to people's stories, there was just something very tender about it, that I didn't want to stick a camera in their face, and I wanted it to be just very carefully done. And so we recorded the audio in a sound stage that we kind of created, very intimate, just me and the subject. The camera was, the sound guy was out of the area with the boom mic hanging over. And so it was, yeah, very intense and personal, getting these stories.
When you screened it last year, how was the reaction from the audience and who came? And let's hear about that.
Yeah. So a number of the people in the film came, and it screened in the Highland Park community. So, I think for a lot of people, because the approach is so different, that everybody was very appreciative of the film. But what they, I think, appreciated most was just how different it was. Not only do you not see the subjects, and maybe people would have been interested in that from Highland Park because they recognize voices and recognize their neighbors, but what they talked about was the fact that it was so surprising. They expected to see things that would have been upsetting, and the film doesn't do that. Again, in treating this material, I just didn't want to show people running through the streets. I didn't want you to hear gunshots. I didn't want to, because I knew the first audience was going to be the Highland Park community. But I also had hopes for a wider audience, and I didn't want to traumatize people with that. I think it's impactful enough hearing these voices, hearing the trauma and what they went through. It's powerful enough. You don't need to see that again. The nightly news does that very well. I have no problem with the news doing what they do. But in this film, I just wanted to treat it differently. So yeah, I think that audience really appreciated it. And then it played at the Chicago International Film Festival, where it was very well received as well.
This wasn't the only mass shooting, folks, that happened that year and years to come or years before. And I think the genius of that poster is really cool too, because it's like I saw it, there's stuff written behind. I'm like, oh, maybe it's the people that were affected by it or something. Then you watch it and it's like, no, it's actually the names of cities of other mass shootings that are going on as well. So do you play a part in the marketing of your films, or like the poster or any trailers or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, the poster was kind of, I conceived of it and had a graphic designer create it. Yeah, I think it is very powerful. And, whether it's good marketing material or not, I'm not sure. It's black, it's dark, it's memorial. It's a very heavy subject matter. Even treated with a lighter touch, it's still very heavy. And so it's been challenging actually to get it out into a wider audience. I've made good connections with, and one of my hopes for the film, because the voices that I heard in Highland Park were echoes of the voices that we all hear around the country on the nightly news. And so I felt like I want the whole country to see this, because this is something that we're all dealing with and living through. It is a collective trauma. And so I've reached out to a lot of these national gun violence prevention groups and have made good inroads, but have not gotten the kind of traction that I hope to. But it's still a work in progress, and we'll just keep pushing. But I appreciate folks like you helping me spread the word. And if anyone wants to see it in Kenosha, I'll bring it up there. So
Yeah, because I'll tell you the production value of it, the camera shots, I am just like stunned. You cannot look away from the screen. It's just so captivating on those camera shots. And for those that haven't seen the movie yet, and at the end credits, not just John working on it, there's a number of people behind the scenes of all your movies as
oh
well.
yeah.
With that, so they all did a really great job on that. And the Q&As, maybe we can touch on the Q&As too. Are you involved with the Q&As after the screenings?
These two screenings, I will not be. I'll be introducing the film, and I'll be there, and I'll be happy to talk with people after. But these screenings, I wanted to have a conversation with some of these gun violence prevention groups. So the screening on the 11th is with a group called Project Unloaded, and they're working with trying to just change the narrative around gun ownership, and not that we shouldn't have guns, but just being aware of the conversation. And then the screening on the 14th is with a group called Safe Illinois, and they're working on kind of more broadly public health issues, of which gun violence certainly impacts public health.
Up to those screenings and check them out. And go on to wayfartheaters.com to check out the upcoming screenings for Memorial as well. And then we got to plug your production company. Do you guys have a website, social media? Let's hear all about it.
Siskel Jacobs Productions, SiskelJacobsProductions.com. You can kind of poke around and see the different films that we do. And yeah, I'm sure we do. We're not great with social media, but yes, we definitely have a presence out there.
I
Yeah.
encourage people to check out your work. You do in your production company do excellent work. And John, thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thanks, Jason. I really appreciate it.